safeguard in the Senate has always been the filibuster. But again, not my issue, not something I get to even weigh in on.
There's a lot of concern about we want to reopen the government, but there's greater concern about health care costs.
This is Today As It Happened. Good Friday evening to you. I'm Del Walters here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. First out, our congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed gives us a look at President Trump's recent demands for Senate Republicans to go nuclear.
We are on day 31 of the government shutdown. President Donald Trump is calling on the Senate to scrap the filibuster so Republicans could bypass Democrats' objections and pass a bill to reopen the federal government. The president posted on Truth Social Thursday night, quote, "The choice is clear. Initiate the nuclear option. Get rid of the filibuster." To help us break down exactly what that means, Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed joining us live from our newsroom here in Washington, D.C. So, Nate, the president's suggestion to end the filibuster, to go nuclear, would certainly come with some consequences, yes?
Absolutely. Look, when the shoe's on the other foot, when your party is in the minority, it's something that you use a lot. Democrats rallied during the Biden years about getting rid of the filibuster. Now it's something that they're employing all the time to try and stymie the Trump agenda. Same exact thing that Republicans have done during the Biden administration, other Democratic administrations. Republicans, for that reason, not likely to want to go along with President Trump's push to eliminate the filibuster. But again, as these crises grow worse in Washington, as this shutdown stretches even longer, hard to see what the way out of this government shutdown is. Lawmakers leaving Washington yesterday without any agreement to reopen the government, to prevent SNAP funds from running out. House Speaker Mike Johnson speaking right now, already criticizing Democrats for this shutdown. The reality is Democrats would need to lend their votes to any government funding bill because of that 60-vote threshold. Again, the vast majority of legislation doesn't need a simple majority in the Senate to pass. It needs 60 out of 100 votes. Republicans only control 53. Therein lies the challenge and the benefit of the filibuster.
Well, Nate, you've been talking to lawmakers all month about the shutdown, and the impacts are getting bigger and bigger every day. Do the lawmakers have any response, concern, plans?
Well, look, there's certainly a lot of concern, clearly not enough to keep lawmakers here over the weekend. Republicans told me they didn't think it would be a worthy exercise because they don't think they're going to reach a deal with Democrats. But Democrats, their chief advocacy over the past month, a permanent extension for these Affordable Care Act tax credits that, again, since they have not been extended, when Americans log in to their open enrollment site tomorrow for the Affordable Care Act, in their state, the healthcare exchange or marketplace, they're going to see much higher premiums. I was chatting with one of our colleagues who lives in Utah, saying that they're seeing increases on their marketplace in Utah of up to 400% for some healthcare plans. Again, this is exactly what Democrats had been campaigning against. But even though there are all these other cascading issues, air traffic control issues, unions coming out and saying that Democrats should end the shutdown, Democrats saying that they're going to keep up the fight, and so far not dissenting on their ranks, Democrats all sticking together, voting to keep the government closed and continue to push this issue, these Affordable Care Act premiums. Take a listen. Are you seeing any indication that there's dissent within the ranks?
No.
None.
There's a lot of concern about we want to reopen the government, but there's greater concern about health care costs. There is an intense concern that now that we know what the rate increases will look like for every state, what's the response from our states? How do people feel about it?
Look, Democrats are trying to keep up that push, but they're not in Washington this weekend. Hard to see what the off-ramp is. Republicans have maintained that they will negotiate on the Affordable Care Act and possibly an extension to those subsidies, which expire at the end of this year, but only once Democrats vote to reopen the government. Again, both parties, Stephanie, not seeing eye to eye. The government remains shuttered at least through the weekend. This shutdown going to day 34 at least. Again, no indication that on Monday anything will be different.
Yeah, the stalemate certainly seems to be stuck in the same place for now a complete month. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed, thank you very much.
And now let's take a look at some of our other top headlines of the day.
Take a look at this video out of New York City showing deadly flash flooding hitting the Big Apple Thursday. Torrential rain killed at least 2 people who were caught in flooded basements. Water is rushing into subway stations, cascading downstairs as the heavy rainfall battered the city. The storm also swamped roads. It even closed part of the westbound Long Island Expressway. The National Weather Service issued flash flood warnings for much of the city, including the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan, as the rain fell at a rate of more than 1 inch per hour. The Justice Department is investigating whether leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement defrauded donors during the 2020 racial justice protests. Federal officials have issued subpoenas and served at least one search warrant as part of the probe into the BLM Global Network Foundation. Now, the foundation took in over $90 million following George Floyd's murder, but faced criticism for spending those donations, including at least some on a $6 million property in Los Angeles. The foundation says it is not a target of any federal criminal investigation. And Prince Andrew is no longer a prince. He has been stripped of his title and will move out of his royal residence. This is just more fallout from his relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Buckingham Palace announced Thursday King Charles has initiated the process of removing Andrew's style, titles, and honors. The former prince will now be known simply as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and must surrender his lease for the Royal Lodge. The palace says the censures are necessary, even though Andrew continues to deny all the allegations against him. And actor Jesse Eisenberg is preparing to donate one of his kidneys to a complete stranger. The social network star made the surprise announcement Thursday morning on NBC's Today Show. The 42-year-old said he's excited to make the donation in mid-December and that he's giving his kidney to a stranger because, quote, it's essentially risk-free and so needed. Most of the roughly 100,000 Americans on the organ transplant list are waiting for a kidney.
This is Today as It Happened. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Today as It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories.
FBI Director Kash Patel says multiple people allegedly plotting a violent attack during the Halloween weekend have been arrested in Michigan. He made the announcement on social media but didn't release any other details. Dearborn, Michigan police have confirmed the FBI conducted operations in their city and assured residents in the Detroit suburb that there is no threat to the community. Illinois advocates are suing federal authorities over alleged inhumane conditions at a Chicago area immigration building. The ACLU of Illinois says the Broadview facility is vastly overcrowded and the Trump administration is using it to hold immigrants for days, even though the building isn't equipped to hold detainees for more than a few hours. The lawsuit alleges ICE agents have blocked members of Congress and journalists from accessing the facility, and immigrants have been denied private calls with attorneys. Court documents also say agents have coerced immigrants to sign paperwork they don't understand, leading to faster deportation. It's Friday, and that means it's time for a look at the week in politics with Maritza Giorgio. She is from the podcast Grounded, which she co-hosts with former Senator John Tester. This week, Maritza joining us from Missoula, Montana. And things have been anything but slow this week. So let's start with the president's trip to Asia, what he did accomplish and what he did not. So what stands out to you?
Well, hey, great to be with you, Steph. I think we can say that every single week. No shortage of news headlines. As far as what happened on the president's trip to Asia, a lot of headlines certainly that came out of that. Both sides confirmed that they agreed to a drop in tariffs, bringing the average tariff down to 47% instead of 57%. That was over an agreement to basically crack down on the flow of fentanyl and the ingredients used to make fentanyl that flow into the United States. And they also agreed to kind of extend this truce on even steeper tariff increases for now. Here's what's not accomplished there, though. 47% is still a very, very large tariff. And so that doesn't really bring down the prices for American consumers in a real substantial or meaningful way, especially right now as we continue in this government shutdown. Now, the president said that China also committed to buying more American soybeans and other commodities. That's important right now. Soybeans very much in the news, especially after Argentina started selling more of its soybeans to China, and then the United States is sending Argentina, $20 to $40 billion. So soybeans a very, very big topic right now. The president also told reporters that China is not going to tighten restriction on rare earth minerals. That's important because it's something that was a big concern, especially for this administration, as those materials are used to make basically all of the electronics we use. The other thing that really didn't come up that stood out to me is that President Trump said that Taiwan never came up in his meeting with Xi Jinping. That's a huge hot button issue when we talk about international diplomacy, especially in this region. Many experts compare the tensions there to Russia and Ukraine. And in my reporting over the years on the use of nuclear weapons, experts have always told me that it's that territorial dispute that they most worry about when it comes to the use of nuclear weapons. So we'll see what happens.
Well, speaking of nuclear weapons, the president said this week that he wants to start testing nuclear weapons, something the U.S. hasn't done since 1992. So do we have any insight on what's behind this sudden push from President Trump?
Well, it's interesting. In his Truth Social post, he talked about other world powers doing these tests, but people within his own administration says that that's not exactly what's happening. All experts say that the U.S. the U.S. has other ways of testing our arsenal. We haven't done this in decades, like you said, 1992. And nuclear experts are warning that what this does do, it teaches our adversaries a lot more about our own nuclear weapons, think like Russia and China. So right now they use simulations, and that's how they test things. And the worry here, the concern is another nuclear arms race, basically, a test that would trigger more reciprocal testing, arms buildup amongst other nuclear powers. Russia's already been threatening the use of nuclear weapons, of course. Even an underground test also could leak radioactive materials. It would be expensive. Foes could gather a lot of information. And there's also a lot of questioning about why this test would be announced on social media before a plan. And there's reporting from CNN that some of the president's closest advisors were taken aback and surprised by this announcement made on social media. And lastly, engineers say that these tests can be done through simulations. And also, he talked about the Department of War, formerly the Department of Defense, conducting these tests, but our nuclear weapons are historically maintained by the Department of Energy. So a lot of questions around this announcement.
Yeah, and it's certainly not unusual for the president to make big announcements on social media and for us and members of the media to then go back with a lot of questions that we don't necessarily have answers to. One other thing we want to ask about the National Guard. There's reporting now that National Guard officials in all 50 states have been asked to establish a quick reaction force to handle things like crowd control and civil disobedience. We've certainly seen the Trump administration's use of the Guard cause a lot of controversy already. So how is this new news of a quick reaction force landing across the country?
I think we will see here, this is all from a leaked memo, and that memo orders the Guard from every state to train about 500 service members and lays out plans to basically send crowd control equipment like tasers and batons and pepper spray to each state. About a month ago, NPR and Ipsos released a poll and really about this and how people felt about the National Guard being deployed to specific areas across the board. Only about 35% of people on average actually supported deploying National Guard troops to certain geographic locations. I don't know what that looks like today. We are a month later, and if all of a sudden it's not just this trouble spot or that trouble spot that's not in your own backyard, I would be very interested to see that polling today. But when you talk about broadly forming rapid response teams in all 50 states, I think that's a different scenario and a different question. One thing someone brought up to me in a separate conversation, though, as we talk about heading into the weekend and SNAP benefits going away, and people lining up at food banks, is that, a lot of crime, at least petty crime, is driven by desperation. So I do worry what will happen as we enter a weekend when 42 million people won't be getting their SNAP benefits and what the results of that might be. And I think it just points to the example that there are so many ways to combat crime and fight crime. In addition to deploying force, it can also be done preventatively to make sure that people don't get to that point of desperation in the first place.
And then this government shutdown just gets harder and harder. The impact gets bigger and bigger the longer that it continues. And as you mentioned, we're on track. Certainly it seems to have this become the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. Marisa Giorgio,
hey, Steph.
host of the podcast Grounded.
One more thing, I just want to mention that we are doing a special episode of Grounded this afternoon, specifically about hunger and SNAP benefits and kind of what people can do. So keep an eye out for that.
Absolutely. And you can find Grounded on Blue Sky, Substack, Instagram, YouTube, really wherever you get your podcast. Maritza, thank you so much.
We'll be right back to continue our look at today's top stories. You're watching Today as It Happens, Scripps News Rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. So let's jump right in.
With the government shutdown, now in day 31, the impact gets bigger every day. Head Start programs that provide critical daycare and education for kids up to 5 years old are running out of money. As of November 1st, Head Start programs in 41 states across the country will be out of money. These programs serve around 65,000 children, providing early learning, nutrition, health screenings, and more. And without funding, kids will lose access to education, teachers will be without pay, and parents will be forced to find some way to fill the gap. Joining me now is Kim Gussie, a parent with 2 kids enrolled in her local Head Start program. Kim, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me this morning. So let's start simple and basic. Tell me about your kids and the Head Start program that they're enrolled in.
Well, I have 2 foster babies. They're 5 and 3, and they both go to Head Start. My 3-year-old has cerebral palsy and epilepsy. So they have hired a nurse for him for all day to work with him. And just in case he has seizures, there's a nurse there to take care of him.
Your Head Start program is one that is at risk. I believe the program where your kids go, there's some classrooms that are going to be able to stay open next week, but other classrooms are going to have to close. If you're not able to send your kids to their Head Start program, what does that mean for you at home?
My husband will have to take a leave of absence from work, which impacts us greatly. It also impacts the teachers at school that can't afford to, live with no pay.
What is it about the Head Start program that is so critical for your kids? What is it that they're able to get through this program that they maybe wouldn't have access to otherwise?
They have done so much for us. They are family. They got a grant to pay for a nurse for him. They've never gotten a grant for one child before ever in their history. They've bought a bed for him that fits him and his needs. They're like family to us. And closing down is gonna hurt us all.
What's your message to Congress? What is your message to lawmakers who have been stuck in this, stalemate now for a month, and it's impacting Americans like you, families, parents, kids across the country?
Please don't do it. Please. Keep these schools open. They educate children. People need it. They need to be able to live. It's affecting the middle class people the most. We need to be able to go to work. And our kids need that education.
Your husband, you mentioned he'd be the one who would be staying home, taking a leave from work. Is that a leave he's going to have to take unpaid? Does he have any paid time off that he's able to take advantage of to kind of help financially?
No, he can't. He had back surgery this year, so he used all his FMLA. So he will have to stay home unpaid.
How long can your family hypothetically live like that with your husband not getting a paycheck and your kids stuck at home because they can't go to their Head Start program?
We're just going to have to deal with it until funding is available again. So hopefully it won't be long.
Seeing a picture of your foster daughter right there, and then your foster son. Kim, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us this afternoon and to give us a little a little window into some of the struggles that families are having to face across the country because of this extended government shutdown. Kim, thanks so much.
Thank you very much for bringing this to people's attention.
Prince Andrew is a prince no more, stripped of his royal title and told to move out of his royal residence. It is the latest fallout over his relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Scripps News International correspondent Ali Barrett has our details from Buckingham Palace.
The process is underway to formally strip the former Prince Andrew of all of his royal titles. That was a decision that was announced by Buckingham Palace, with King Charles recognising that more needed to be done as allegations continued to swirl against the former Prince Andrew, made by Virginia Giuffre, allegations he denied in her posthumous memoir, and ongoing allegations related to his relationship with the former convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. As well as the formal removal of all of his royal titles, Andrew will move out of the Royal Lodge property in Windsor that he's been living in for decades now. The royal family had announced earlier this month that he would stop using most of his royal titles, but the public and politicians' clamour for more to be done by the royal family has now been acted on. Buckingham Palace sources say that they now accept that there have been serious lapses of judgment on behalf of the man now known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Ollie Barrett for Scripps News Group at Buckingham Palace in London.
We'll be right back with more of today's top stories on Today As It Happened. We're glad you're back with us on Today As It Happened. I'm Del Walters here with your daily rundown of today's top stories. 9 million YouTube TV subscribers now blocked from seeing any football, any basketball, any hockey stems from a contract dispute with Disney, which owns ABC and ESPN. That dispute wasn't resolved before the deadline, YouTube TV saying Disney used the blackout as a negotiating tool to raise prices for consumers. Disney claims YouTube is refusing to pay fair rates for its content. YouTube telling its subscribers it will get a $20 credit if the blackout continues. GoPuff is joining other major delivery companies to help SNAP recipients, 43 million of whom could lose their food assistance because of the government shutdown. GoPuff says it will provide up to $10 million in free groceries to SNAP customers beginning tomorrow. SNAP recipients can get $50 in discounts on certain items during the first 2 weeks of November. Meanwhile, Instacart also offering to help, giving a 50% discount on their first grocery purchase. DoorDash is waiving its delivery and service fees for food banks and pantries. It is day 31 of the federal government shutdown. That is all of October. Now 42 million Americans are wondering what is going on in Washington. Their SNAP benefits, are on the line. Food stamps they need to feed their families. And there will not be a miracle on Capitol Hill as both houses of Congress are gone. But two federal judges just hours ago telling the administration to pay up and use emergency funds to keep the flow of funds flowing. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull is live on the North Lawn right now. And Haley, has the White House responded to the rulings by these two judges?
Del, not yet, and we are waiting to hear the White House's reaction at this hour. Leading up to this, they have been very vocal in placing the blame on Democrats as millions of Americans faced that expiration of SNAP benefits as funding was set to lapse tomorrow. The U.S. Department of Agriculture had maintained that it could not use those contingency funds, which it says do not cover the full month of November. Secretary Rowlands explaining it, saying that that contingency fund can only flow when the underlying program does. President Trump earlier today was pressed on the possibility to figure out funds, stating this at the time.
But all the Democrats have to do is say, let's go. I mean, they don't have to do anything. They don't have to agree. All they have to do is say, the government is open. And we only need 5 Democrats. But they've become a radical left party. They really have become a very radical left party. And they've lost their minds. They've lost their minds. All they have to do is say, the government is open, and that's the end of it. And, largely, when you talk about SNAP, you're talking about largely Democrats. But I'm president. I want to help everybody. I want to help Democrats and Republicans. But when you're talking about SNAP, if you look, it's largely Democrats. They're hurting their own people.
Meanwhile, Dallas, we have not seen either party substantially change their position What we are now hearing from the president is his call for what he calls the nuclear option. Specifically, he is calling for Republican leaders to do away with the filibuster. And that is that 60-vote threshold required in the Senate to overcome an objection. President Trump claiming that could end the shutdown, writing on Truth Social, quote, "If the Democrats ever came back into power, which would be made easier for them if the Republicans are not using the great strength and policies made available to us by ending the filibuster, the Democrats will exercise their rights, and it will be done in the first day they take office, regardless of whether or not we do it." Now, Republicans have typically opposed this measure, Dell, and there are not any signs that they are budging on that position. A spokesperson for Senate Majority Leader Thune stating his, quote, "position on the importance of the legislative filibuster is unchanged," as Republicans have typically cited potential policies that could move forward under a Democratic leadership and majority control of the chamber, Dell. So certainly we are waiting at this hour to see what, if anything, the White House has to say on this court ruling. This is not the first time, though, their policies have become ensnared in legal challenges. This one, though, a major one when it comes to the developments in the shutdown we are seeing play out, with millions of food benefits for millions of Americans, rather, on the line this afternoon, Dow.
Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Beaufort live from the North Lawn. Haley, thank you very much. You're watching Today As It Happened. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Del Walters. Let's jump right back into our rundown of today's top stories. Joining me now, Scripps News political director Andrew Rafferty, to dig into some of the feelings and emotions around the extended shutdown. As we mentioned, 31 days now, the entire month of October. But before we go to the polls, it appears the courts have provided a last-minute reprieve for SNAP benefits, but you say time may not be on their side.
Yeah, and you're right, Del. Those two rulings, both coming from judges separate of each other, but both defeats for this White House and for the Agriculture Secretary, who I know you spoke to earlier this week, who has maintained in these last few weeks that they can't use these contingency funds unless the entirety of the program is continued on through a fully funded government. But I do want to get to something that we just heard from the president, this idea that it is Democrats who are mostly reliant on SNAP. And while it's hard to kind of parse any of the numbers in terms of the political ideology of people who are using this program to feed themselves, to feed their families, it is worth noting that there are a number of major Republican states that rely heavily, above the national average, on these programs. You know, you look at it, it's about, what, 42 million people? Yeah. That's about 12% of the population. Well, it evens out to about 12%. And you have states like Florida, like Texas, yeah, who are above that national average, Louisiana, where the Speaker of the House is from. And so the idea that this is somehow hurting the constituency of one party over another is not as clear-cut as certainly the president made it seem. And there are a lot of his supporters who are dependent, we know, on this program.
In fact, if you look at a breakdown on a national map, it is clear that the Republican-led states are the ones that seem to be suffering the most. But also with regards to the shutdown, both sides pointing fingers at each other. Who is American blaming?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting as we get into the beginning of November, both with this SNAP benefits, even if they do get turned on, there's still the potential that they are only partially funded or only funded through the beginning of November based on what is in that contingency fund. You couple that with the health care costs, not only those Affordable Care Act exchanges, if those subsidies go away, how much more people could be paying who rely on government-funded health care exchanges. On top of that, some of the travel problems we've seen cropping up throughout a number of airports throughout the country. We are seeing concern rise pretty dramatically from where it was at the beginning of this shutdown. Here's what ABC News, Ipsos, and the Washington Post teamed up to do a poll to look at that exact question. And you see the numbers from October 1st, Dell, just 25% of Americans said they were, quote, very concerned about the government shutdown, now up to 43%. I imagine if we even put another poll in the field today, that number would even be higher. The other thing that is interesting when it comes to the politics of this is there might be a little bit of coalescing around who is to blame. Because we have seen polling that indicates Republicans and President Donald Trump are more at fault than Democrats, which is also a change from what we saw in some of the early polling beginning of the shutdown, where there was more of a mixed bag. Not only here in Washington, but some of the polling for those two big governor's races in New Jersey and Virginia, voters there also saying that they are more likely to vote to blame the president and Republicans than they are to blame Democrats. Of course, Republicans have not only the White House, but also the House and Senate.
I was going to ask you about that because they say all politics is local, but in this case, it appears that both races, the one in Virginia and the one in New Jersey, appear to be affected by everything that is happening in Washington.
Yeah, and look, we've seen early voting both in those two states, and it has been strong for Democrats. The numbers tracking ahead of, in some cases, where they were 4 years ago. Of course, we're talking about off-year elections, elections that in the odd number years don't always get the type of attention that certainly a presidential race would, but we are seeing some strong numbers. In New Jersey, we had the party breakdown, and we know Democrats are outpacing Republicans. Again, not unexpected. We know Democrats tend to vote earlier than Republicans. They're much more comfortable with that. But there are a lot of election watchers who are saying, yeah, the numbers are looking pretty good for Democrats. Of course, we don't read too much into that. We will see when it's all said and done come probably late Tuesday night. But certainly if you're a Democrat, if you're Ken Martin, the head of the DNC, who's been out on the campaign trail, you are happy with what you're seeing in these two key states.
Before I let you go, though, the overall optics, are they starting to become a factor? We've got the east wing of the White House being torn down. We've got soybean farmers that are upset. We've got beef cattlemen that are upset. Is the overall now optics of what is happening in Washington, regardless of whether it is a D or an R in front of it, is it now starting to become a weight?
Yeah, and look, you talk about the optics. We've talked about those striking images of the White House being demolished, Democrats on Capitol Hill, obviously eager to talk about how that compares to the idea that people's health care is going up, that people's supplemental nutritional aid is potentially going down, and that there's thousands of federal workers who are going without a paycheck. This has really, from the Democrat standpoint, sort of bolstered their political messaging, but it is going to be difficult if you have 40 plus million people who are without food stamps. If the people at some point, until you've gotten to this, they get tired of the blame game, the finger pointing, they just want some results. And so it is a tough position for both parties, but certainly some of the imagery that you talked about and the overall mood of Americans when it comes to their economic outlook, which is almost as pessimistic now as it was at this point ahead of the campaign in 2024, I think is certainly not the trend that you want to be on if you're a Republican.
Before I let you go, because the producers are going to scream at me, but does this go back to Elon Musk in that chainsaw and the Doge cuts? Is that where it all began? Because we talk about people losing their SNAP benefits, but for not millions of Americans, but for thousands of Americans, they lost their jobs.
Yeah, and I think in the Virginia race particularly because there are so many federal workers, and that has been a huge issue, not only the shutdown, but as you mentioned, those Doge cuts earlier this year. Of course, the federal workforce more prevalent in Virginia than perhaps any other state. I think it will be a huge factor. There's some other things going on in some of the down ballot races that we have talked about that'll kind of perhaps muddy the water for Democrats. There's a scandal involving one of the Democratic Attorney General candidates, but I think you take that as a holistically looking at who is more for us, whether it's federal workers or people who are just looking at how much groceries cost right now.
We'll be right back to continue our rundown of today's top stories on Today As It Happened. Welcome back to Today As It Happened this Halloween night. Let's take a peek at some spooky stories uncovered by Scripps stations across the country, from elaborate haunted houses to the science behind jump scares. Let's jump right in.
Halloween isn't just for kids anymore. More adults are embracing the holiday, turning October 31st into a celebration all their own. When you think of Halloween, you might picture kids in costumes, candy, and school parades. But these days, adults are taking back the night, bringing back the magic of Halloween in their own way.
Halloween has been important to me most of my life. I've been giving parties for over 30 years.
For Camille Tucci, this celebration has always been about connections.
I wanted a holiday that was my own, where people were available, because on Christmas and the other holidays, it's a family thing. So this has become a way to keep friends together.
And she's not alone. A recent survey by Ferrero North America found more than half of Americans believe Halloween is as much for adults as it is for kids. And 47% say it's their favorite holiday of the year.
You can see from my Jack Skellington back there, I am a huge Halloween fan. It's probably my favorite holiday. Not probably, it definitely is.
Psychologist Dr. David Schwartz from Oakland University says that's no surprise. Adults are rekindling the joy they once felt as kids.
The stigma of, kind of connecting with those childhood experiences and being able to have that sense of joy that we used to have as children has become, more acceptable.
And an excuse to step out of their comfort zone.
I think it's a combination of a big dose of nostalgia, because a lot of us had a lot of fun experiences with Halloween growing up. I think combined with a chance to really kind of engage with our creative side.
Getting to express yourself, artistically, dress up as different things, be, whoever you want to be.
And not just through creativity.
It's a chance where we actually get to face some of our fears, face some of our anxieties in a very controlled and yet fun atmosphere and fun environment, so it makes it less threatening to us.
For many, Halloween is no longer about trick-or-treating. It's about tapping into that childlike wonder and maybe a little spooky self-expression, too.
I've always liked scary movies and the horror genre. It's a chance to be something other than yourself. It's a chance for pretend.
Megan Daniels, Scripps News Group.
This Halloween, there's a real science behind making you scared. I went to Denver's 13th floor haunted house and CU Boulder to see how fear works in the brain and how their new research could help calm real-life anxiety.
The second I walked through the gate, this guy came up behind me and I screamed on the top of my lungs.
In the dark halls of the 13th floor haunted house in Denver, fear is the whole point.
There is nothing like creating this environment where you can scare people and give that escape.
But behind the screams, there's science.
We want to kind of take ourselves out of that reality and enter into a new, different reality, a new realm, so to speak.
There's a lot of 90-degree turns, and one of those, there was a bit of a jump scare that definitely got me.
CU Boulder Assistant Professor Dr. Susana Molas says the same brain circuit that makes you jump scared could someday help people calm real-life anxiety.
The main goal of this project is basically try to understand what neural circuits control a threat response and reduce our, let's say, defensive strategies once we learn that stimuli are not harmful.
To study it, her team built a kind of mouse-haunted house. A predatory-like shadow passed overhead while they measured brain activity. They discovered a region called the interpeduncular nucleus, or IPN. It lights up when a threat appears, but quiets down when you realize you're safe. In people with anxiety or PTSD, that system may be stuck on.
What we have learned is that if there is a repetition of exposure of this shadow, but nothing happens, this immediate freezing response and also escaping to the protective area, that fades away over time.
Dr. Mullis says this discovery could lead to new, more targeted treatments for people with a more active IPN circuit.
And that might help developing therapies for anxiety or PTSD, because then you might avoid more secondary effects.
Back inside the haunted house, fear is all in good fun. If your IPN circuit is more active, that may explain why you don't like being scared.
It just gave you the survival instinct.
For others, that momentary panic is part of the thrill. In Denver, Richard Butler, Denver 7.
It started one piece of wood at a time.
I didn't know how to build a ship. I just went at it little by little and went for it.
Army combat veteran Bionardo Puerta didn't have a treasure map, but he did have a vision.
I just see cool stuff and and just start building.
A few years ago, he dressed as Jack Sparrow from the Pirates of the Caribbean for Halloween. When a trick-or-treater asked him where his ship was, he decided to make one.
We would love to have people help us build it, but he himself doesn't know how to do it until he's actually doing it.
He and his partner Jennifer Pierce created handmade holidays on Raven, steering the community towards making memories.
We made it important to have something where when they pull up, it's that wow factor, and they will never forget it.
It started with a Christmas display, and now it's all hands on deck for Halloween. Creating memories, Bionnato says, are better than buried treasure.
I'm not supposed to be here.
While serving in Afghanistan, he nearly died 3 different times.
As a vet, sorry. It's important because time is precious. And in a moment notice, you're not here.
But while he is here, he wants to make the most of it.
So I'm trying to make a difference by, giving as much as I can with what I got. And what I got is my hands, and I could build stuff.
No, we're not Disney, but I think it looks pretty cool for just being a retired combat veteran and a stay-at-home mom.
Helping families set sail into an experience to last a lifetime and beyond.
I'm Denver 7's Colin Riley, and since 1889, the Airedale building has had many tenants. Some say those tenants have never left. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, you have to admit there's something fascinating about the unexplained. Now, a local paranormal investigative team is coming here to see what they can find.
There are 2 types of people in this world. It's either you 100% believe, or you want to believe, but you're terrified of what's on the other side.
Since he was a child, Arthur Schmidt has been searching for answers to his own paranormal experiences.
No one would believe me. I felt constantly dismissed. And so I just figured, this is going to be my life.
Now, he and his crew are filming a TV series. Awakened, Haunted Wild West explores sites across the western U.S. Sites with spooky stories, like Ophelia's electric soapbox.
We're cracking open the history books and shedding the light into the dark corners.
Over the years, this building's seen documented deaths, including the original owner's 18-year-old daughter. Managers Desiree Flynn and Rachel Noble say they've sensed a presence from the past.
There's someone here, there's probably a few people here.
Whoever or whatever it is, likes to mess with the lights, music, and knock things off the bathroom wall.
I'm in one stall and the receptacle falls off of the wall in the stall next to me. So I'm like, oh, not a big deal. Again, the building's old, it's moving, it's shifting, whatever. Well, it shot out of the stall. And I said, okay, I figured there was spirits here. I'm here to work, not here to bother you, like we can be friends or whatever.
Wielding history and special tools, the crew aims to open the minds of skeptics, including a member of their own team.
Well, even as a skeptic, I feel like it's still hard to deny.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's been proven that there is energy.
And the goal of the show isn't just to scare people.
Being able to kick those stories up and give that to our audience while sharing real evidence of activity, that's something that I'm interested in.
In Denver.
It's to open the light a little bit, open your eyes, your minds and hearts and souls to really what is there.
Colin Riley for Denver 7.
Thanks for joining us this evening on Today As It Happened. I'm Del Walters. Have a good Friday night and a happy Halloween.